Whether you like it or not, the Tesla Model 3 is the most important car to launch in the last decade. Not only because of its popularity, but also because it's made electric cars so affordable and so accessible. I think it will go down in history as our generation's version of something like the Ford Model T or Volkswagen Beetle. What we're looking at today though is its first major facelift. Yes, the brand has changed things before, but the car we're looking at here, while it looks quite the same, is actually nearly 50% new underneath. So has Tesla addressed some of our major criticisms of the outgoing vehicle? And is it much better this time around? Let's take a look. The new Model 3 follows the same range and pricing structure as before. The popular entry-level rear-wheel drive, the one we've sampled for this review, comes in at a little over $60,000 before on-road costs and state-based incentives, while the mid-spec long range, set to arrive in February, costs $10,000 more. The top-spec performance has not yet been revealed. Expect to see that version rejoin the range before the end of 2024, and Tesla has promised something really special in store for it this time around. Unlike when it first arrived in Australia, the updated Model 3 is under threat from multiple directions. The refreshed Polestar 2 has just launched with even more range and a similar set of under-the-skin improvements, and it's at a similar price point too, while the BYD Seal looks to make a splash with a similar form factor but bargain pricing. If you're already familiar with the Tesla range, not much has changed in terms of standard equipment this time around, although some bits have received a major upgrade. There's still LED headlights and 18-inch wheels with aerodynamic covers, that massive 15.4-inch central control panel, synthetic leather seat trim, this time with ventilation and upgraded designs, dual wireless chargers up front, a power tailgate, and of course the brand's signature best on the market software suite, with always online connectivity and a sleek app too. Upgrades for this year include extended soft trims throughout the cabin, ambient interior lighting, and a blind spot camera for use on both sides while indicating, and a rear touchscreen for climate controls and entertainment for rear passengers. It's not all good news though. Still missing are things like Apple CarPlay connectivity, with the brand forcing you to use built-in versions of apps, and there's no digital instrument cluster or head-up display. You also have to delve into the accessories list to get things like a cover for the sunroof and a tyre repair kit, both things which should really be standard. There's a whole lot more to this face than just those new light fittings. In fact, the Model 3's redesign is more function than form. This whole bonnet piece has been redesigned and the car has been entirely reprofiled to reduce the drag coefficient and even reduce wind noise collecting on the bonnet. This continues across the silhouette of the car all the way to a new shapely boot fitting with a nice little wing finish to it. While I didn't mind the Porsche-style front lights of the outgoing car, the new slim ones really grew on me. And other upgrades include a much more contemporary set of lights at the rear with new Tesla badge work there as well. As a bonus, there's even cooler redesigned versions of the aerodynamic hubcaps for the base rear-wheel drive's 18-inch wheels. On the inside of the new Model 3 is where the majority of actually visible changes have occurred, and they're really quite lovely. The previous car, it wasn't bad, but the seats didn't breathe very well. There were a few hard plastics around the cabin and some not so convincing finishes. It was a nice minimalistic space, but that's continued here as well. There's a new steering wheel. It's missing the big Tesla logo. It's now got some sort of contemporary typeface on there. There's a nice carpeted finish in the doors and running across the top of the dash, replacing that wood infill that was there and the plastics that were in here. And this is a really nice contemporary material. A lot more manufacturers are moving to this material because it's a bit more genuine than fake leather, and it's a bit better than hard plastic as well. But in this car, it's functional too because it reduces the amount of noise entering the cabin. And these sort of soft materials have continued all throughout the cabin, and even into the boot, the hard plastics have been replaced by a carpeted finish. So that's a really notable upgrade to the ambience in this cabin. Now, the other thing that's been upgraded for this car this time around is a lovely ambient lighting feature. This strip runs through the doors and all around the dash, almost like in a Volkswagen ID4 or something, and it really does lift the ambience in this cabin to go with the quieter, higher quality finishes too. So really like that about these upgraded features. But the features that were in the car before have also been tweaked. So you've got a better screen, these nice roller covers are included again and have a tasteful sort of finish on them. But one of the other biggest upgrades is the seats. The key thing to know about these is there's been a focus on comfort and breathability this time around. So the sort of straight finish of the previous seat has been replaced by a perforated finish in the center, and there's also better side bolstering this time around. So these are much more comfortable to sit in, they breathe better. It's all around a much nicer cabin than it was before. So how about practicality? Has it been upgraded at all? Well, it's been tweaked a little bit, but the essential offering is basically the same. Those two lovely wireless chargers are there for your phone and keeps this interior nice and cable free. You've got a relatively large pocket in the doors here, which is good for our largest 1 litre CarsGuide bottle, and this slide open cover reveals 2 more cup holders in there too, which have been tweaked a little from the previous ones. They're quite nice in there as well. You've got a huge center console here as well, and if you go under this roller cover, there's quite a large space under there with a 12-volt power outlet too. You've got the glove box, which is weird because you have to activate it through the multimedia screen. Again, bizarre. And then there are some major changes which I think no one was asking for. It's like Tesla can't help itself. It has to mess with the car formula. This here is stalkless. At least that's what Tesla calls it. And that means they've removed the drive selector stalk. That's now operated through the touchscreen. It's pretty weird. And the same goes for the indicators. They've removed the stalk for that, and they're now buttons on the steering wheel. I was kind of worried about these changes because I thought I'd really dislike them, just like I dislike other parts of this car, like the lack of a dashboard. However, after about 24 hours of driving it, I was really used to the button on the steering wheel setup. It's actually not as bad as you think it's going to be. And the drive selector, it's nice and slick, although there has been the odd occasion where it's natural to pull a drive selector towards you to select drive, and I've accidentally selected reverse because I pull the car towards me, which actually selects reverse. You push it forward to go forward, and then there's a button for park. But honestly, I didn't really mind these changes in my time with the car. Again, I would love a cover for that sunroof. While the tinted glass works fine at keeping the sun out when you're actually driving around, and you can preset the climate control via the app on a hot day, forgetting to do that will mean an absolutely boiling interior if parked outside in the summer sun. Next, let's take a look at the back seat. Okay, back seat of the Model 3, and this is one of the areas where this car has been, again, majorly upgraded. Those soft trims all continue, the ambient lighting continues, and there's actually an increase in other padded finishes in here, again, to reduce that noise and to lift the cabin ambience up a lot. As you can see, behind my own driving position there, I've got quite a bit of knee room, so I'm pretty impressed with that. As usual, the floor is nice and flat, so there's somewhere to put your feet, making that middle spot kind of useful for an adult. It is a little narrow in here though, and these seat claddings have been redesigned to be more comfortable and let you sit a bit sort of nicer in this space as well, and it's worked. I feel like this is much more comfortable than what I remember the previous car feeling like. Now, again, I'm 182 centimeters tall, and headroom is getting a little close to the danger zone there. You wouldn't want to be too much taller than me to sit back here in relative comfort, but for me, it's pretty good. The biggest upgrades in this version of the car is a completely redesigned back of the center console. There's now a screen back here, and I know you might laugh because, oh, so they could put a screen there, but they couldn't put one for a dashboard. But anyway, you've got one back here, and it's got some cool stuff in it. You've got the touchscreen thing to control the air vents this time around. You've got some entertainment options, which might be great if you've got kids back here, and a sort of a separate climate zone for control, which is really nice. 2 USB ports continue on the backs of those seats, and you've got some clamshell finishes on these. Don't love those, but they're fine. Other than those for storage, you've got a decent bottle holder in the door with a bit of a pocket going on in there as well. And this sort of clever armresting, which has the headset integrated, I love that. And there's 2 more bottle holders in there too, but they are a little bit narrow. They only just fit our big bottle here. If I really push it, there we go. Boot space is largely unchanged this time around, but because it's a sedan, unlike the Polestar 2, which is more of a liftback, it's a bit harder to get objects in and out. To fit the whole CarsGuide luggage set, for example, we had to use the underfloor storage area for the smallest case. There's also a pretty big frunk, which measures at 88 litres. I don't find I use frunks very often in the real world, but it can be good for storing charging equipment if the boot is full. Now, one thing that hasn't changed this time around is the Model 3's motor and its battery. And honestly, they didn't need to change anyway. They were already some of the best on the market. The Model 3 has always been excellent when it comes to driving range, and this continues for the update. This time around, the base version can travel a whopping 513 kilometers according to official WLTP measurements, although my car was showing more like 430 Ks when I charged it up. I assumed this was to do with the excessive energy consumption during our video shoot and testing with the aircon blasting for hours straight on a hot day. Hopefully we can bring you a more accurate range test at a later date. The Model 3 rear-wheel drive's quoted charge speed is 170 kilowatts on a DC fast unit, allowing 282 kilometers of range to be added every 15 minutes, according to the brand. I charged up once at a 75 kilowatt EV unit, which took me to 95% from 20% in about half an hour. Meanwhile, on AC, the Model 3 scores a max rate of 11 kilowatts no matter which variant you choose. There's no two-way vehicle to load system either, so the Model 3 does miss out on that particular electric car utility. On our test, we also overshot the energy claim by about 2 kilowatt hours to 100 kilometers. Although with a still and video shoot on a hot day, we were hardly giving the car the correct environment to shine. The previous Model 3 was actually lovely to drive. It was fast, it was agile, it was effortless, it was all those great things, but it was also a little bit unpolished. For all its great attributes, it had some genuinely unpleasant ones. And this time around, the brand has gone to lengths to address them. There's all new suspension in this car, where the previous car was firm to a fault, it was crashy, it was noisy. This version of the car is significantly different. Even the very mounting points where the suspension connect to the body have changed, and the result is a car which is much more resolved when it comes to dealing with the everyday bumps of life. It even deals with larger bumps well, but maintains that kind of firm, sporting character which made its predecessor so great to drive in the corners. Things that haven't changed this time around include that rear motor, but you've still got hot hatch performance on offer here, and it feels faster than the numbers suggest because you do have that instant application of the torque and the really clever computer managed traction control as well, which makes this car so quick and so much fun to drive. The steering also seems to be largely carryover. It's really lovely and it has so few turns to lock that it makes the car feel like really darty and kind of engaging to drive. But the three modes are quite computer assisted, so it is a little odd to drive at first, but if you're coming out of another car, it's something you have to get used to. The three modes include comfort, standard, and sport. And honestly, I only really like standard and comfort. Even standard is pretty heavy, sport is so heavy it's almost useless. It is a little different in a Tesla if you've never driven one before. I've driven enough of these cars that I'm quite used to the odd features in them, like having to control everything through the touchscreen, that off-center speedo, and the lack of a digital dash. Now you also have to deal with the oddness of the indicators on the steering wheel and that drive selector on the screen, which just sort of add another science fiction element to the drive experience in this car, alongside that radar screen and that always-on nav. Another major thing that's been addressed this time around is the amount of noise entering the cabin. That's to do with all of those materials we talked about before, but also to do with the new suspension and various other upgrades throughout this car. For the most part, the problem's been solved. If you're driving around at city speeds, it's really lovely and quiet in this cabin now, especially with that new acoustic glass and everything going on. But I have to say, once you get up to those kind of freeway speeds, you're starting to get a bit more tire noise into the cabin. And I think that's less to do with the amount of sound deadening in this cabin and more to do with the fact that we're on firm, efficiency-based EV tires. Now these tires go a long way to increasing the range, but they obviously have the downside that they are a firmer compound and therefore they don't quite have as much grip as maybe some other tires might have, but also that increase in rolling noise. Now the other thing definitely worth mentioning about the Tesla drive experience is the excellent autopilot suite. Now don't treat it like it's a true autopilot because it's not, but it's one of the best systems on the market in terms of adaptive cruise control. It's disturbingly good at staying in its lane, and it's disturbingly good at keeping a really accurate distance from the car in front. So while yes, it's not the true autopilot experience, even if you opt for the full self-driving, which is questionable of whether it's actually full self-driving or not, it's still one of the best computerized cruise systems to have as your pal on a long trip. It's not without its weirdness, and it's not without things that you'll need to get used to, and it's not without small flaws, but this car has improved out of sight. I'm really pleased with the changes that have occurred under this car to make it so comfortable and so much better to live with than the previous Model 3. These are the kind of changes which are going to go a long way to keep rivals off this car's back, because as you probably know, and you might want to watch our Polestar 2 review, that car has also been upgraded with a better ride and more range. And the same goes for the BYD Seal. That's a new competitor in this space that's even more affordable. So the Tesla really did need these upgrades to stay ahead of the pack. Now you might think Tesla could just rest on its laurels and keep the same safety equipment that it had before, because it really does tick all the major boxes. But this car's been upgraded yet again. So a new safety test over in America for side intrusion has meant that there's new sort of lips in the doors to make this car even safer in the event of a side impact. And the safety systems have been upgraded. So you've now got a blind spot camera when you put the indicator on. That's a nice additional touch. And of course, you've got the usual auto emergency braking at freeway speeds and all the other safety systems that we really do expect at this price and in this category. There are now 7 airbags in the cabin, with the addition of a front center airbag this time around. And as the Model 3 is an update on an existing car, we expect it to be able to carry across its maximum 5-star ANCAP safety rating it achieved in 2019. One area where Tesla really lags the competition is its warranty, which comes in at 4 years and 80,000 kilometers. This is a full year less than what we like to see as a minimum, and most automakers are also offering unlimited kilometers during that period. However, the high voltage battery and drive unit are covered by a separate and more industry standard 8-year and 160,000 kilometer warranty. Service pricing is computer determined, meaning the car will tell you when it's time to visit a shop. From what we can see, Tesla's service items are reasonably priced, but the big thing to look out for on EVs is tires, because they affect everything from your efficiency to handling, because these cars are much heavier than their combustion equivalents. So there you have it, Tesla's Model 3 upgraded. While it's still got some quirks and the competition is closing in, I'm really pleased with what's changed this time around to keep this car ahead of the competition. It really is still king of the EVs, at least in this size bracket. What do you think? Would you buy a Polestar 2 or a BYD Seal instead? Tell us in the comments below, and don't forget to check out our full written review over at carsguide.com.au.